in Mountain View on the east side of the Big Island in the Puna district, which most people have not heard of. So we bought this farm 3 years ago, almost to the day actually, and we bought it from somebody that planted coffee about 15 years ago in 1997 and 98. And yeah, this field has been here for a little bit over 15 years, and that's the age of the coffee that's here. Well.
When we purchased the coffee field, he had sold it to us unknowing if we were going to continue, or any buyer would continue on with the coffee business. And so it had been neglected for quite some time, and it was more of a coffee jungle. And so we spent a couple of years really working at pruning and fertilizing and learning about coffee growing. And it's only been 3 years since we bought it, and we did win the statewide championship this year, the first time that a non-Kona or Ka'u farm did that. So we were really proud of not necessarily what we can do, but we as a region can do.
Yeah, and that's sort of too where kind of the name Big Island Coffee Roasters came from. Very straightforward. For one reason why we chose that name is it communicates exactly what we want to. It tells you exactly who we are, where we are I should say, and what we do. And Big Island Coffee because, well, coffee, like wine, depending on where it grows, has completely different characteristics. So even if you have the same cultivar coffee, where it's grown and how it's grown really creates a different profile in the cup. You experience many different flavors and aromas. So Big Island Coffee Roasters for us was a way to denote our commitment to quality as far as all of the coffees that we encounter and that we decide to source and roast and offer to our customers.
And specifically, we really try to work with coffee on the east side of the Big Island that is a little bit niche and or unheard of, from maybe parts of Hilo and Hamakua and even parts of Ka'u. And of course Puna, that's our namesake, right? And so about a third of our business is roasting for other farmers and milling and grading for other farmers. And so we get a really good sample of all the taste profiles throughout the region. We've done a lot of free consultation with the farmers in this region to try and boost the quality of everybody's coffee. And out of that roasting, when we can offer the farmer something that they find acceptable, then we can buy that coffee and roast it to our preference and sell it after that. And things that kind of signify us as a region. Obviously Kona is about coffee. Puna has a lot of boars, a lot of papaya, and a lot of volcanic rock, and a ton of chickens and cockfighting as well. But the boar really seemed to be an apt signifier for a couple of reasons. One is that it's got a phenomenal ability to sniff things out and to taste, and it can smell from miles away. And so we took that on as part of a, I guess, help me out here.
Well, it's a very apt representation of the fact that coffee is mostly a olfactory experience. Yeah. And so largely what we smell in coffee is why we can taste things, right? And that's just sort of a fact anyways of our ability to taste. So we thought that the pig was perfect because, for one, it represents the east side of the island. Anybody that lives over here, that lives in the Big Island, and in particular either Hamakua or Puna, everybody knows somebody that hunts pigs, and everybody has had smoked meat at one point or another. So we thought it was sort of a very apt signifier for this region of the island in particular, which is what we're trying to sort of bolster and brand in many ways. So it's perfect fit for that, right? And sort of beast, and that is very much what the east side of the Big Island is for us anyways, and Puna in particular. A pig is adventurous and it's exploratory, rugged,
and that's what we want to bring to the coffee industry in Hawaii, is a little bit more than just go with what you've known and go what's comfortable and familiar. We want to bring high quality coffee from different areas of the Big Island. Perhaps they're niche or perhaps they're just unexplored right now, but that's what we would like to do.
Yeah, and that sort of segues really well into what we feel like makes Puna very distinct as far as a region goes in Hawaii. And it's not just Puna that is special. every coffee growing region in Hawaii has its own particular niche and qualities and stuff like that. Puna coffee in particular, I think, if I can speak for you, I feel like we both chalk it up to the terroir. And that's obviously a wine term, but you know, we have high rainfall here on this side of the island, which is very different than the vast majority of places where fall. Second of all, we've got straight rock that we're growing on. Beneath our feet is cinder. Beneath that, it's pahoehoe. So it's just lava. We've got
and
lots.
It's just sulfur too, and it's quite well known that sulfur is a very formative aromatic compound within a lot of primary aroma groups. And so one thing that we keep hearing over and over again, whether it's from Coffee Review or whether it's from other cupping specialists, is that there's an aromatic intensity that's untasted anywhere else, and we really attribute that to the sulfur and the pahoehoe.
We feel sort of adds to the unique characteristics of our coffee in particular, and just our coffee. There's lots of other Puna coffee, but what's really kind of fun and cool about our field, at least from our perspective, is we have a lot of varietals in here. Now, chiefly we have mostly Terroir and Katuwai. Those are the two that we have the most of in the field. But we also have a lot of other varietals and a lot of unknown, unidentified varietals as well. And we sort of have kind of, I think, settled on the nice round number of, we have about a dozen varietals here. That, we don't know if it's necessarily true. Could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less. We just like to say a dozen because we can point out at least 8 off the top of our heads that we actually do have.
It was Miguel that said a dozen.
Yeah, about a dozen or so. So this tree that we're standing in front of right now, actually, I don't know what it is. It could be Terroir. It has a slightly different stature than Terroir. Its nodal spacing, basically cluster spacing, is a little bit more open than Terroir. So I'm curious to see what this tastes like. This year is the first year we'll actually be able to sort of separate this out and taste it and see if it has anything different, unique, special about it, worthy of separating it out. We might be able to find other trees in the field that look just like this. But that's sort of, we see it as a blank canvas, right? We can sort of create whatever blend or unique processing methods or separate out particular varietals if they have certain characteristics that we don't find once everything is mixed in all together. So what's nice is that after 3 years, as Kelleigh had mentioned, this field was completely overgrown when we bought it. It's taken a lot of work, a lot of pruning, a lot of fertilizing, and most importantly, time. So over that time, we've actually been able to see more variation in all the varietals out here because we're actually witnessing new growth with proper stature, better care, better maintenance. All of those things sort of roll into one to give us a perspective that is actually quite a bit of a mosaic compared to what we thought it would be, which was just kind of one type of coffee and treating it just like one type of coffee. So for instance, the obvious sort of distinction between coffees that you can see very, very clearly, it doesn't matter if you're trained or not, is the different color of ripe cherry. So we've got red cherry out here, we've also got pink cherry, and we've also got yellow cherry. So the yellow cherry we've already separated out. The yellow Terroir, we use a different processing method than we use for everything else. And that's because we found that we didn't like that varietal when it was processed just like everything else, and we didn't want to just throw it in the mix with everything else because we saw it as having potential for a different unique experience. Yeah, basically we didn't like how it tasted as it was, and 2, we didn't want to dilute the rest of our harvest with that one varietal, and 3, we thought it would be fun to experiment with one varietal and do something totally different with it. And luckily, honeyed yellow Terroir is what we got, so that one's
I think it's kind of important to make known that we don't have a lot of coffee, and so like when we're talking about doing these varietal separations, we're working with 50 to 100 pounds
for the year.
For a lot of sometimes that means waiting lists, and sometimes it's boutique, or sometimes it's private tastings. And so most of our coffee is actually done estate, so it's all mixed together. But when we have a fair amount of something, or we're very confident in the way that the processing and the roast profiling has turned out, that is really the only time that you'll see it for sale.
Yep.
So we do have a lot of different coffee varietals, but we don't post them very often.
These are all pretty defined, definite clusters, right? You've got spacing there that's obvious anyways to any eye. Trained or not, doesn't matter. It's very obvious that there's nice spacing here. And I'm pretty sure this is a Typica derivative, but I'm not positive about that. The reason why I say that is one of the more basic approaches to identifying trees. Most cultivated varietals of coffee kind of fall under one or two categories, and it's either going to be a Typica relative or a Bourbon relative. Typicas will have copper or bronze colored new leaves. Bourbon will have green. Now the tricky, funny part is, obviously there are always exceptions to rules. Yellow Bourbon is still a Bourbon, but it has copper tip leaves, just like a just like a Typica does. So it can get very dicey when you're trying to identify trees because they don't always look like what you would expect them to look like. But this being more open in stature, and by that I mean greater length between clusters and also in your nodal spacing in between the branches, it's a little bit more open than we see in Katuwai, which we'll go check out right now. Katuwai is actually a relative of Katuwai. Katuwai is a parent of Katuwai. Yeah, to simplify it. So anyways, what you can see here is that the clusters are much closer together. Very, very tight. Actually, when all of these green beans ripen and swell up to be red, there will virtually be no space in between all of this cherry. It will just be a full branch of red cherry, ideally. So yeah, you can see that the stature is, at least for our eyes, very, very different than what we were just looking at. Much tighter, much more compact, lots and lots of cherry on a small space. And it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. We've got a lot of this out here. Holds up very, very well to our high rain and high wind as well. It can get pretty stormy here sometimes, with or without Flossie, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, that's sort of the gist of it right there.
Off the vine, however, like one thing that we have noticed during our first years was sort of a trial and testing with the processing. We did notice that right off the tree, it tends to be very herbaceous, and particularly if it doesn't go through a substantial reposo period, then it has this can spinach or asparagus thing going on. And so we did work with the processing it a bit to figure out a way to tone that down and help bring out some of the fruitier flavors.
Yeah.
That I think that we both noticed and picked up on when we first got here is that there is a big gradient between how a coffee cherry tastes and from like one to another and what the color spectrum is. It sounds a little Willy Wonka to say, but the yellow tastes like yellow and the red tastes like red. The yellow Katuwai tends to be maybe more pineapple, lemon, banana and have less of a body and be a little bit more like perhaps citric. And then you've got the spectrum down to dark red, like a really deep burgundy red of a Katuwai, which has a very grapey quality with more body and sort of a sugary sweetness. And anywhere in between. On a molecular level, but it's just something that we noticed.
Yeah, from what we've experienced, it's kind of fun to match the visual experience with the sensory, well, taste and smell experience, right? Yeah. I don't have anything more special to add. You about covered it.
Yep.
Color of cherry definitely relates to flavor and aroma, surprisingly.
Keep the grass down. We've had them really since the beginning, and so we are unfortunately attached to quite a few of them. But as it turns out, the ratio of sheep poop tends to be about the same ratio as you would want to fertilize coffee, and this is a particular variety of sheep that don't tend to reach up to eat. They stay pretty low, so they don't munch on the coffee branches. It was very much a perfect marriage. We don't actually have to feed them any grain except for as treats and to keep them tame. And so, like I said, it's grass-fed lamb. And obviously they do get a little out of control. We have to pare it down, which also helps enable us to be self-sufficient on this farm, because we do butcher and eat the sheep. And we do it in a very, very honorable way. because we very much appreciate the life that they provide to us.